Hi, I'm Adam Summer. You're listening to the Yerushalmi Talk podcast with the support of the Yeshivat Devar Yerushalayim in Har Nof, Jerusalem. This is Sheviis, chapter 3, halacha 7. This is the final chapter, or final halacha in chapter 3. We'll move on to chapter 4. So far, in halacha 5 and halacha 6, we've been talking about constructing and being a contractor or coming and building a structure. Now, very important to keep in mind, the Torah prohibits on Sheviis, it prohibits you from plowing, from grafting, which you're not allowed to do anyway because of Kalayim. You're not allowed to do sowing. You're not allowed to water your field in certain ways on certain times. You're not allowed to prepare the field for growing. You're not allowed to plant. Okay. But there's no restriction, there's no prohibition, shall we say, on constructing something. The Torah is very clear. It's stopping you from doing things related to the field with growing. It's not related to things with mineral extraction and coming and taking things for building. In Halacha 5, we had a law about a field where it was like a mixed-use field. Perhaps the field had some agriculture component to it where they were growing things in the field. But this person also wanted to take the stones and use it for construction. Now, the Jerusalem hills are filled with stones. I mean, there are big boulders all over the place. There are smaller stones all over the place. There's a lot of bedrock here. And it's really great for quarry. In fact, it was used as a quarry for ancient world and ancient times. And even today, all of the buildings in Jerusalem have to have Jerusalem stone covering the building. There's a lot of stone here. And stones will obstruct a field from being plowed. And if you try to plow a stony field, you're going to destroy your plow. You're going to blunt your plow. Then you have to resharpen it. And it's hard to work with. So, you would, if you wanted to try to grow like barley and flax and wheat here in the Jerusalem hills, you would have to clear away the stones. Now, it can look like you're clearing away the stones to go and get a field ready. Why would you want to be growing flax? Well, flax was used for medicine, and flax was used back in the time for clothing. That's how you made linen. So perhaps you're trying to set an area up to grow flax or to grow something else. So if you were clearing away stones, it would be very suspect. It looks like you're preparing a field. However, if you're having bigger stones, and as it's talked about in Halacha 5, and you're leaving a layer of stone underneath, and you're moving the top layers of stone above it, then it's clear you're not setting it up, because you can't run a plow over stone, right? You destroy your plow. And first of all, the plow won't go through, but you actually damage the equipment. So what it's saying is, okay, if you're going to take this really for construction use, which you're allowed to do, you got to leave a layer of stone right at ground level. Got to be connected to the ground. It's got to be a tefach high, and the reason is because you can't run a plow across it. It's showing that you've dafka used it for the intention of construction. Now, halacha 6 in the end of that Mishnah talks about constructing, but you're doing a construction project where the stones that you're taking are very, very close to this building. And that's going to really be showing that this person's intention for taking these stones is legitimate, because you can look at him taking these stones, and you can look, a few feet over, and you see, oh, well, there's a building he's building, and that's clearly where it's going to. He's not trying to build a field here. He's trying to build a building here, and I see the building right here. And he's not going to be plowing here. He's not going to be doing planting here, because this is being used for a building and a construction project, and the area next to it is related to this construction project. So there's two exceptions to this, and that's what Halacha 7 is about. We have one problem with, removing stones, and that's going to give an impression that he's clearing a field for planting. And that, by the way, is going to be a violation of the laws of Sheviis, but there's two exceptions. And here's how the Mishnah sets them up. So the Mishnah says, shoulder stones may be brought from any place, and a contractor may bring stones from any place. Now, this is two different things. This "and" is connecting two different ideas. Now, contractor, this is talking, as we've seen in chapter 1, 2, and 3, all of the Morris Ein issues here have to do with the city that you're in. It's not concerning people coming from another city and coming and seeing what's going on in this city, okay? This is dealing with the people in the city, the citizens in the city, and how the citizens in this city relate to each other, okay? That's how the Morris Ein is working in Sheviis. So if you have a contractor and he's going to be bringing stones from any place, well, it's known in this city that this is a contractor. It's known that this guy is not a farmer in any way. This is what he does. He's a kablan. He goes and he builds things. And a builder has no prohibition on Sheviis against building. The farmer has a prohibition against planting and clearing the field in Sheviis. The farmer has a problem. The builder, who's actually, this is his job, it's known, he doesn't plant anything. All of the money he makes from being a builder, he takes and buys agricultural products. Okay, this guy is not a farmer. Okay, he can take stones from anywhere. And by the way, any size, even from his own field, because he's a professional builder. And nobody's going to sit there and suspect him of clearing his field because he doesn't farm. Okay, this is a guy who's getting the stone because he needs the construction materials. Okay, now in the last law that we had, in the last Mishnah, it's permitted to take small stones only if they're in arm's reach of a construction site. And over there, that's talking about somebody who's doing a personal project. It's not talking about a professional builder. Okay, so let's say you're a farmer, and let's say you're trying to build a small barn or a small shed to hold your tools. Okay, fine. And you're going to do it out of stone because that's the material here. It's pretty expensive to go find trees, cut them down, turn them into lumber. But trying to build something with stones that are all over the place here in the Jerusalem Hills and put some mortar there, which is easy to make, that's very reasonable, okay? Well, this is a guy who's a farmer who's doing something for his personal use, and you see the construction project. So basically, if he's next to his construction project and he can reach his hand out and grab the stones that are all next to this construction project, there's no problem. But if this guy's going out into the middle of the field to go gather stones, well, then you got to go look at Halacha 5, where you got to leave underlying rock, and you got to make sure that there's underlying straw, and you have to do things to demonstrate that your intentions are legitimate for construction, and that there's not a back of the hand way where you're trying to empty the field of stones. But the case in this mission is talking about a contractor. That contractor, this is a professional guy who always needs building materials, okay? He's never farming, and he's always building. And he's always, even if he has a field, right? Even if he owns a field. Why does he own a field? Well, maybe he needs to lay down his construction tools, and he needs a storage yard. In fact, even in the modern world, a lot of the contractors need storage yards for all of their, tools. So perhaps you have scaffolding, perhaps you have a lot of buckets for things. Well, you have to store it somewhere. So perhaps he has a field and there's rocks there, okay? But that's not used for agriculture. That's used for something else. Now, what about shoulder stones? What about shoulder stones? Well, the Gemara is going to come and define what these are. Now, ordinarily, stones that are a regular size cannot be removed from a field because they're going to lead to a suspicion that the field is being cleared for cultivation. But shoulder-sized stones are obviously used for building. So that's not going to create a suspicion. Now, when the Gemara is talking about from any place, it's going to even mean his own field. Regarding another person's field, he may remove even ordinary stones, as the Mishnah taught in Halacha 4, since a person is not suspected of clearing another person's field for planting. And again, if it's a certain area where the stones have value, you cannot remove the stones from someone else's field. But if it's an area where there's so many stones that it's actually a hindrance, then removing stones from your neighbor is actually a benefit to him. And so it's not stealing, you're actually doing a benefit. Now, shoulder stones, these are going to be things that are clearly going to be used for construction and building. And again, there's not a problem with building on Sheviis. There's a problem with getting stones and with perhaps doing it in a way where it looks like you're preparing a field. That's going to be the problem. So the Mishnah is going to explain the first exception and define what these shoulder stones are. And the Mishnah says, these are shoulder stones. Okay, so it's going to define it. It's going to say, any stone that cannot be carried with one hand. These are the words of Rabbi Meir. And Rabbi Yossi says, shoulder stones are as the name implies. Any stone that are carried 2 or 3 together on the shoulder. So the Rosh Hashanah explains about Rabbi Meir's point that a stone, due to its weight, must be carried with both hands. And as a practical matter, one could transport that size stone either by carrying it with both hands or placing it on the shoulder. But the key point by Rabbi Meir is a person cannot carry more than one of these stones at a time because they're so big. Now, in fact, Rabbi Yossi is going to be more lenient than Rabbi Meir, and he's putting the words shoulder stones in plural. Okay, so let me read the Mishnah again. It says, these are shoulder stones, and Rabbi Meir puts it in the singular. He says, any stone that cannot be carried with one hand. Okay, that's going to imply a very big stone. Rabbi Yossi is saying, and putting shoulder stones into plural, saying, shoulder stones are, as the name implies, any stones that are carried 2 or 3 together on the shoulder. This is more lenient because this is implying more than one stone that could be carried. So basically, this is trying to describe stones of a size that 2 or 3 of them can be taken together, and it can be transported on another's shoulder, and these are going to be large enough to be considered shoulder stones. So this basically, okay, so perhaps what they have in common is that one person can carry this load, okay, of these stones. And the difference between Rabbi Meir is saying it's one stone, and Rabbi Yossi is saying that maybe it's 2 or 3, and that, this could also be carried and transported on one shoulder, but these are still large enough to be considered shoulder stones. They're not small enough to be carried in the hand, that they still, in both cases, have to be transported on the shoulder because of the load. But that, if you have, say, 2 of them, and you're carrying one on each shoulder to move it, that would satisfy Rabbi Yossi's point, which would be a little bit more lenient. Rabbi Meir would say, no, it'd just be one that you can carry on one shoulder. So that's going to be the difference between the two. The Mishnah now is going to talk about structures that can be built with these stones, and it's going to focus on the laws of building a wall during Sheviis. So the Mishnah says, if one builds a wall between his field and the public domain, he is permitted to dig down to the bedrock. And what should he do with the dirt? He should pile it in the public domain and then repair the area by clearing the pile. These are the words of Rabbi Yeshua. So there is an obligation to allow people to enter the field during Sheviis. and that's going to be where people are allowed to come and pick the produce. But you can prevent other people from coming and damaging your field, okay? And you don't want your soil and maybe your furrows and everything to become degraded. So you're allowed to prevent people from entering and destroying trees and other plants. And you can also protect trees and plants that the Torah did not entitle them to take. There's also, says the Chazan Ish, no obligation to allow animals access, even the produce of the field. One is therefore allowed to build a wall around the field on Sheviis to protect from these trespassers, as long as he allows access to people coming to pick the produce. So the Torah does say that the wild animals do have the ability to come eat it, but what they're trying to say is that there's no prohibition of erecting a wall to prevent it, because let's say you have wild boar. There are a lot of wild boar in the north of Israel, and every year they do a lot of damage to the farms and the farmers. And you're allowed to protect your crops from wild animals. I mean, yes, they do have the ability to eat this produce during the Sheviis year, but if you built a wall, you're still allowing wild animals to get to it, because crows come and eat all sorts of produce in the field. They'll eat all sorts of vegetable matter if they can't get meat, and they'll eat seeds and things like that. So that counts as a wild animal, but you're also enabled to come and protect your trees. You're also enabled to come and protect against ruining the value of the product, the value of the trees, and the way the layout of the land works from fire and from fungus and from all sorts of things that would destroy your productivity. So if you had wild boar, as there is a problem with it today in the north in Israel, they will destroy trees. They will eat up a lot and mess things up. Also, you do have in the Jerusalem hills wild goats. Sometimes at night in the summer times, you can hear wild goats making their sounds. And if you had a day where there were more wild goats in the Jerusalem hills, well, you would be worried that perhaps they would eat up your grapevines or something like that if you had a vineyard. So you could set it up where you're setting up a wall and still leaving access for people to get in and out, perhaps with a gate, and they could get access to it. But you don't want the wild goats to come in and to destroy and eat up all of the grapevines. So that's some of the reasons why you could be building a wall. Yes, I know that the Torah does say, the animals, can have access to the food, but there's also not an obligation, as the Chazan Ish says, to allow animals access to the produce of the field. So you are allowed, says the Chazan Ish, to build a wall around the field on Sheviis to protect it, as long as the people have access to come and pick the produce. Because again, you don't want your field being ruined and destroyed. So it also takes a lot of work to set up furrows with the plowing, and those are used year after year in production. So if you have a bunch of ignorant people kicking around the field and destroying your furrows and things like that, it can also damage the farm. You have to go redo the work. So over here, we're talking about where it says, if one builds a wall between his field and the public domain, he is permitted to dig down to bedrock. Well, this is saying how far it's possible to dig, basically until he hits bedrock. And the sages did not prohibit digging during Sheviis for the purpose of making a wall, because you could say that perhaps somebody could confuse digging with hoeing, and hoeing would not be allowed. but they also allowed the building of a wall because they were the sages permitted this activity, as the Gemara is going to be talking about, because on one hand people might be worried that people might change their mind halfway through the process and then decide to cultivate the area that he dug, but the sages are going to allow it. They're going to say that no, his intention is that he's building a wall. Now, the Rambam in Hilchos Shmita 2:14 is understanding the Mishnah's point a little bit differently. He's about disposing of the dirt, and he's going to be saying that during Sheviis it's problematic and there's no easy solution, as can be seen by the entire discussion from the Tanaim. And the Mishnah is teaching that despite this problem, the rabbis permitted digging even to the bedrock, and a digging that was likely to unearth large quantity of dirt. So then the question comes up, how do you dispose of this dirt? How do you get rid of it? Because you can't simply dump it in the field, because if you do, it looks like you're spreading topsoil on the field to get it ready for planting. So what they're saying is that you should take the dirt and pile it in the public domain. That way it doesn't, it's clear to everybody that this is your field, this is a public domain, and you put the dirt into the public domain. You didn't put it into your area, which could look like spreading topsoil to enrich the field and look like you're actually setting up for perhaps hoeing later and things like that would be getting the field ready for planting. The Mishnah says that Rabbi Akiva says that not only may one not cause damage to the public domain by piling dirt in it, but by the same token, one may not even repair it by making a pile. So what then should someone do with the dirt? He should pile it inside his field in the manner of those who store dung. So Rabbi Akiva doesn't agree with Rabbi Yeshua's solution for disposing of the dirt by first creating a temporary obstruction in the public domain and then removing it. And in Rabbi Akiva's view, this person is forbidden to ruin public domain even if it's temporary. And he's also forbidden to ruin the public domain permanently. And Rabbi Akiva is adding that not only in this case may one not make a temporary dirt pile in the public domain, but even when stones and dirt are spread throughout the domain and one wishes to repair the domain by collecting all these obstacles and placing them in one pile, one may not pile them in the public domain. Rather, Rabbi Akiva is saying that you should actually just dispose of it right away by taking it to a river or taking it to a dump site. And if there's no dump site, you should basically treat it like you're making it a dung pile. And the Mishnah is going to add and say, similarly, one who digs a pit, a ditch, or a vault is subject to this disagreement among the Tanaim. So Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Akiva disagree on how to dispose of the dirt up during Sheviis, and they're also going to disagree about disposing of the dirt even in a non-Sheviis year. And so Rabbi Yeshua is maintaining that somebody who's going to also dig a pit, ditch, or vault in any year may temporarily dump his dirt in the public domain as long as he removes it. Rabbi Akiva forbids it. That's in any year. So Rabbi Akiva objects to Rabbi Yeshua's recommendation, basically because he's holding that the person is not authorized by the public to perform these repairs. And so it's going to be permitted for the public to decide how to repair the road and fill the holes. So the Gemara is going to start off talking about the first part of the Mishnah, and the Gemara says, shoulder stones may be brought from any place, even from within his own field, and a contractor may bring stones from any place, even those smaller than shoulder stones. So we were talking about shoulder stones where they can be taken, even by people who are not contractors which is what the Mishnah is stating, because again, it's talking about contractors, has this and in there. And that and is saying that contractors can do it, and then regular people can do it. And, basically the statement that a contractor can take stones from any place, even his own property, is referring to stones that are smaller than shoulder stones. Okay, so that's also something to keep in mind. So, again, the Gemara says shoulder stones may be brought from any place, even from within his own field. And a contractor may bring stones from any place, even those smaller than shoulder stones. So again, this is setting up, leniencies. And the Mishnah stated that if one builds a wall between his field and the public domain, and the Gemara is going to comment about it. So the Gemara moves on. It seems that everybody's in agreement that the contractor can bring stones that are smaller than shoulder stones, and also bring it from any place, even his own field. And the shoulder stones also, for the regular person, can be brought from any place, even from his own field. So that's going to be a key idea. But again, this is because you're removing these stones because you're going to be using it for a construction project. You're not removing it because, this is a shoulder-sized stone in the middle of the field, and I want to plow, and I want to, I know that this is going to ruin my plow, so I need to move it. Okay, that's going to be a problem. But this is talking about somebody who's, not a professional builder, who's going to be building something, and even in his own field, he needs the construction material. So because he's building something, he's allowed to go get a shoulder stone even from his own field, even though that, it's not there next year, and it's not going to ruin my plow next year, but he's not taking it with the intent of doing it for the plow. He's taking it because he needs this now for the construction project. That's the point. So in the Mishnah was saying that if one builds a wall between his field and public domain, the Gemara is going to comment, and Rabbi Chia says, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, that they taught in the laws of building a wall during Sheviis only if it is between the field, his field, and the public domain, and implying that between his field and the fellow's field, it is forbidden to build a wall during Sheviis. And in this situation, the sages did not permit somebody to dig a foundation for the wall because it appears like he's hoeing, and it also appears like he's plowing. So at the boundary between his field and the public domain, the Mishnah is going to allow him to build a wall that's going to be trying to prevent unlawful trespassing that could damage his property. So at the boundary of the field and the his fellow's field, there's no need for a wall. Okay, but the idea would be if you're bordering another field and your neighbor has another field over there, you're assuming that the public also doesn't have access to his fellow's field. So then there's no special need to protect your field from the neighbor. But the sages still prohibit it. And basically the idea, says the Rosh, is that the sages generally forbid building a wall because they're afraid that after starting to dig the foundation, the person may decide to plant the site rather than build it. And whereas field would border another person's field, this fear is going to be still valid. But at the border with public property, this is not going to be valid because it's not common to plant produce so close to a public area. Because again, close to a public area, people can come and sneak in and steal it. There's no protection for it. So again, Rabbi Chia says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, they taught that the laws of building a wall during Sheviis only if it is between the field and the public domain, implying that between his field and his fellow's field it is forbidden to build a wall during Sheviis. But on Kol HaMoed, even between his field and the public domain, it is forbidden to build a wall. Why? Because work on Kol HaMoed, you're not allowed to have exertion. And the idea is that, even if you have, even if you don't do this work and it could lead to a loss, but this work is going to make exertion, then it's still going to be forbidden to build the wall, even at the border of the field and public domain, because the Torah says you're not allowed to exert yourself. So, this is also drawing a distinction between the type of work that exists in Sheviis and the type of work that exists in Kol HaMoed. There is a difference. And so that even if you're having the same agricultural work process, sometimes in Kol HaMoed it's going to be forbidden because that's going to be exertion and you're not allowed to exert yourself, but there's no problem with exerting yourself on Sheviis. Now, the Gemara is going to talk about building a new wall in Sheviis and about repairing an existing wall that had a break in it. And in Moed Katan 1.4, it taught that during Sheviis one may rebuild a wall where there's a breach in the wall, and you can do that in the normal manner. Okay? So the Gemara is going to qualify this ruling, and the Mishnah permits, this is the Mishnah in Moed Katan 1.4, the Mishnah permits one to rebuild only where the area of the breach is not closed up by the dirt wall support. So the Rosh Cirilio says about this that walls built on the border of a field consist of a layer of stones on the outside and cemented by dirt and mortar on the inside to provide support. And the Mishnah is allowing you to rebuild the breach in the wall only on the inside layer where you're putting up more mortar to firm up this wall, and where that dirt wall was also breached, and it basically creates an opening into the property. So you have an idea where the dirt wall is going to be a support, and it's going to be between these layers of stone, and also could be creating a slope to help shore up the wall so it doesn't fall over. And so basically what it's saying is that the stone part came out, and also this dirt part became opened. And only then can you come in and repair it at this time in Kol HaMoed. So that you can't do it. So the Mishnah permits one to rebuild only where the area of the breach is not closed up by the dirt wall support. So if it's totally open, you can come and repair. I'm sorry, if it's where the breach is not closed up, so that it's open, you can come in and do it. And the Gemara continues, says, but where the area of the wall is closed up by the dirt wall support, it is forbidden to rebuild the wall in the area of the breach on Sheviis. So, since the property already is protected by the dirt wall, and that support is still intact, this repair is not necessary to keep out trespassers. So basically what this is saying is that you're only allowed to rebuild something that's has totally opened up, and if part of it is still closed up, you're not allowed to repair it, because again, they're doing it like a sandwich. One part is just stone, and then they're mortaring it in place, and maybe they're building a ramp to shore it up from falling over. And as long as you have that ramp up, but the stones fell down, you can't repair it on Sheviis. And the idea is that the property is still enclosed, and because it's intact, you don't need to repair it to keep people out, because it's clear that it's a boundary. And you're not allowed to rebuild a wall on account of this rabbinic decree against digging. And the idea is that rebuilding a wall does not serve a functional purpose, and the rabbis are going to always permit non-essential improvements of a field on Sheviis, according to the Radvaz. So that's a deep insight about it. In other words, that this is going to be like a cosmetic fix on the wall to make it nicer. And, functionally speaking, the dirt part behind it is still there in place. And so you still have a boundary there, and so it still has functionality. So they're not going to let you come and rebuild that kind of stonework to put it back into place, because again, it's not essential. The Gemara is now going to prove this from a brisa, and it's going to say, but it was taught in a brisa like this: any breach that is closed up by dirt and a dirt wall support, it is forbidden to wall in on Sheviis, but one that is not closed up by dirt and a dirt wall support, it is permitted to wall up on Sheviis. So again, if it's totally open, you can go and dig and put up the stone support and the dirt wall as well to reinforce and shore up that wall. And doing so would still be allowed, even though that there's digging, because again, you can see that this work is not being done to prepare a field and dig and get hoeing ready, that you're doing it for a purpose of trying to come and set up a wall to keep people out. So there's a functional need. You're trying to protect your property. So the Gemara is going to qualify the statement where the breach is closed up by the dirt and where that dirt wall is going to be supporting it, where it's going to be forbidden to rebuild the wall. And the Gemara says, and this is true only if the breach wall does not obstruct the public. But if it will obstruct the public, then even though the breach is closed up by the dirt wall support, it is permitted to wall it up on Sheviis. So the idea is that, says the Rosh Cirilio, that the rabbis permitted him to rebuild the breach in order that the public is not harmed. And the Gemara in Moed Katan is adding that this allowance applies even in the cases where the wall is not breached. For example, if the wall is leaning into the public domain and it looks like it's going to fall over, you're allowed to demolish and rebuild it on Sheviis to avert any danger from falling and that wall falling over and injuring people in the public domain. So you are allowed to do that. But again, that's going to be because you're worried about protecting people, and because that's clear that you're not improving the field, that you're doing it for this thing. You have a wall that's falling over, and it's clear that you're demolishing this and you're taking earthwork away to help to support this wall, because this wall is falling over. And so if you see them hoeing and things like that to get and digging to redo the wall, it's clear that he's not making a field or preparing a field. It's clear that he's setting things up to make a stable wall. That's going to be the idea. And, part of the idea is that, if there's no danger of the dirt and the stones falling into the public domain, where it would impair the public, or perhaps it would ruin a thoroughfare that the public could use or hurt people. So, the stones at the point of the breach that do not, have sharp edges that could harm or injure people, in the public domain, those can be treated, because again, you want to, this border of, what's along the public domain and what's not, that's what you're worried about. And the Mishnah then is going to get into this discussion between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yeshua. So the Mishnah stated, Rabbi Akiva says one may not even repair the public domain by collecting its obstacles into one pile in the public domain. And the Gemara is going to ask, and it's going to say, it is written, one who orders the way, I will show him the salvation of God. And this, by the way, is in Tehillim 50:23, and it's going to say, do we not see from this verse that it is has merit, where it's talking about order the way, and that's going to be trying to get rid of public obstacles in the public domain. So why basically does Rabbi Akiva say that one should not do this? In other words, the Gemara is going to be trying to demonstrate that this is in fact what the verse is referring to. So the Gemara is going to answer. It's going to say here it's different, because it is a repair that ends up being harmful. In other words, that although, says the Pnei Moshe, one is collecting stones and dirt from the public domain, and he's certainly repairing it, but when he leaves all these obstacles in a pile on the side of the road, for a time he's harming or inconveniencing the public and the public domain. And that resulting harm may be a danger. And, he might be setting it up even for a short period of time, and in the end it might be harmful. So, the idea is that this repair is temporarily damaging the public domain, or it could cause a mess. There's a lot of construction things, and there's tools and things lying all over the place. And if you're putting it in the public domain, somebody could trip or hurt themselves, or something like that. And so Rabbi Akiva is holding that you should not be piling these things up in the public domain. Now the Gemara is going to talk about this basis for the assumption that the verse is talking about one who orders the way, and that's going to refer to someone who's removing obstacles from the public way. And the Mara Fulda is answering that the Amorim are going to know this statement and are able to recognize the legitimacy of the question without mentioning the support of the statement explicitly. So after recording this, Amoraic question and answer, the Gemara is going to explain the basis for the discussion. So the Gemara answers and says, here it's different. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, this is the Amorah, as an exposition upon the verse about Shaul HaMelech, where it says Shaul merited the kingship only because his grandfather lit lamps in dark alleys for the public. And for the name, Shaul's grandfather was called Ner, which is lamp. And one verse states, Ner begot Kish. So this is in Chronicles 1:8-33. And that verse continues and says, Kish begot Saul. And again, we know that there's a Mishnah that, there's a Midrash that says that Chronicles has to be read, is made to be read. It's the only book that's in the Tanakh that's made to be read midrashically. And so over here, where they're saying Ner begot Kish, okay, Ner, that's talking about his good deeds. It's not his actual name. It's referring to his good deeds. So the Gemara is going to continue and it's going to say another verse states Kish, son of Avel. And this is saying that the same Kish is mentioned in the previous verse, and the chapter is relating that Shaul was his son. And so then they're saying, was not Avel his name? Why was he called Ner in the first verse? And the Gemara is going to continue. It's going to say only because he would light lamps for the public that his name was called Ner. And since he lit lamps in the public thoroughfare so that people would not trip at night, and he was basically creating order in the public way, he wasn't creating things that were harmful in the public way. He was helping people to get through. He actually had merit that his grandson should become king, and bring about some sort of salvation for the Jewish people. And the Gemara is going to be reasoning that somebody who rids a public way of obstacles so that people will not be harmed should also be considered as ordering the way. And the Mishnah is citing Rabbi Akiva's ruling of how to dispose of unearthed dirt during Sheviis, and is saying that he should pile it inside his field in the manner of those who store dung. And the Gemara seeks to clarify the ruling, and Rabbi Avin inquired and said, when those who do work on Sheviis have not yet stopped working, what is the law concerning whether he may pile up the dirt inside his field in the manner of those who store dung? And basically, this question gets unresolved. Basically, the Mishnah is ruling that dung can be stored in the field, only once these workers have stopped working. So does that mean that Rabbi Akiva is saying that the dirt can also be stored once they stopped working, like with the dung? Or does Rabbi Akiva hold that the dirt must be stored in the same manner as the dung, basically saying 3 heaps per betseah, and each heap would consist of 150 seah, but not necessarily at the same time as the dung, because there's a prohibition on when you're allowed to start storing a dung pile, as we covered in the start of chapter 3. This question is unresolved, so it's unclear. Now, if the workers stopped working, one must either keep the dirt unearthed right next to the wall, or if that's impractical, he may not dig until they stop working. But even before the workers stop working, he can pile up the dirt in his field. But again, that becomes a question on, how do you pile it up and when can you pile it up? And there's just no answer for it. And I don't know what the halacha lemaisa is, but chapter 4, we're going to be getting into more about planting. And that's going to be the most obvious thing when people are thinking about the laws of Sheviis is planting. But, you have to look at all the other things that come with a field. And before you have any planting, you have to do plowing. And that's what we've been covering for the first 3 halachot, first 3 chapters. Have a great day.